Okay, everybody. So welcome to Before Breaking Ground. This is Groundwork NRG's presentation on Community Land Acquisition and Development 101. My name is Monica Probst Medeiros, and I am Groundwork NRG's Economic Development and Sustainability Coordinator. So part of my job is to facilitate training such as this one on economic development tools, environmental sustainability tools to the community to hopefully expand people's knowledge and ability to make informed decisions about different things in the future. So that is partly why I'm giving this presentation today, and also because I am very passionate about learning how to increase and expand the capacity and resources for our community. I'm going to give a chance to allow my co-presenters, Megan Painter, Seth Metling, and Carlonda McKinney, to introduce themselves briefly before we begin. Oops.
Hello, my name is Megan Painter. I am the Director of Neighborhood Development at Community Housing of Wyandotte County. And just coming in from a background, we've built several homes on land bank land, and I'm here to share my experience on that.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Seth Metling. I am the Brownfield Coordinator for the state of Kansas, and I look into doing environmental assessments for potentially contaminated properties or just properties that have unknown past uses.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Carlonda McKinney, and I do work with CHWC. I'm the Director of Social Enterprise Development, but I am here in the capacity of a small developer. So I'm currently building a single-family development in Turtle Hill. So I'm not here. My views are not that of CHWC. They are my own personally development company.
Thank you all for your introductions, and they will be speaking on each of those different topics here throughout the presentation. So I'm going to try and really get to this. I know we already taken up 15 minutes of your time today, and if you could stick with us through the end, we will have a questioning period, and hopefully it will be more than questions. Hopefully it can truly be a discussion between all of us and the information that we're sharing and learning today. So again, welcome. These are both the links that should be floating around in the chat. The first is our virtual sign-in sheet, where we're just going to be collecting your name and a little bit of information about you. And then this is our short entry survey, which will just help us get a preliminary assessment of what your knowledge was coming into this presentation. And hopefully at the end, after our exit survey, we'll see some improvement in just what everybody was able to learn today and share with one another. So thank you so much for coming, and again, thank you for your patience. So I want to begin our presentation with these two questions, which will hopefully guide the rest of the information that we learned today. What is the land bank, and why should you care? So there has been a lot of buzz. I know personally on the news and on my social media accounts, there's been a lot of talk amongst people about Kansas City, Missouri's land bank and what they're calling their dollar sale. And what that literally means is they are selling properties and land that is owned by the land bank in KCMO for $1. Now, if you see here on the left, this is a letter that they put out for requests for proposals. So what the land bank in Kansas City, Missouri is doing and how it can potentially be relevant to us as we learn more about the land bank today. Kansas City, Missouri is currently seeking organizations who can rehabilitate or renovate land bank properties for the uses of housing those who are unhoused, or also creating extremely affordable housing. So over here is a partial quote by the mayor of Kansas City, Missouri, who announced long-term proposals that the City Council of KCMO would consider, including utilizing the land bank as a source of affordable housing, creating a housing division, developing a comprehensive study of homelessness, and other things. So what Kansas City, Missouri is currently doing with their land bank and why it has got so much buzz is that the city itself has allocated 111 of the land bank properties to be used exclusively for the use of housing those who are currently experiencing homelessness. So I just thought that that was an amazing story to share. And if everyone else is aware of that, that is great. But if not, I hope that it's an interesting thing to all of you. And it is very much related to what we are going to be discussing more about today. So while that's on the Missouri side, I want to go ahead and take it over to Kansas City, Kansas, and let's talk about the Wyandotte County Land Bank. So similar to the Kansas City, Missouri Land Bank, who owns a lot of different properties and a lot of vacant land parcels, in Wyandotte County, our land bank contains more than 3,500 vacant lots, which are technically acquired through either foreclosure processes, so people who cannot pay the property taxes on their homes or have failed to do so for a number of years and the homes are left vacant, or also through donations of homes, perhaps people who don't want to take care of them anymore, people who have come under ownership of properties due to someone passing away and passing it down, and different situations like this. So to put it simply, and using the UG's own statement, the duties of the land bank, which is a part of the Economic Development Division of the UG, is to put delinquent tax properties back on the tax roll using various different techniques. So marketing, removing prior year taxes, maintaining an inventory list, and accepting parcels as donations all fall under some of the strategies that they attempt to do to essentially get properties back to a positive tax paying status. So while that is their mission statement, a lot of planning and decisions and value-laden ideas are beneath that. So according to the Land Bank of Wyandotte County, these these 5 things, A through E here, are part of their purpose statement. So the purpose of the land bank and the way that they hope to manage and distribute and essentially govern the properties that they have under ownership is to preserve stable and viable neighborhoods, to halt slowly occurring decline or deterioration in our neighborhoods, to assist neighborhoods that are experiencing rapid decline or deterioration, geographic areas that are predominantly non-viable for the purposes of residential or commercial development, so non-buildable areas, areas that it would just be way too much of a hassle to even build on, as well as impacting areas that are targeted by a strategic development plan. So for Groundwork Northeast Revitalization Group, we are the co-implementation lead for the Northeast Area Master Plan. So just as an example, the Northeast Area Master Plan would be potentially upheld by the land bank in terms of how homes and areas are being targeted for redevelopment and things like this. So the purpose is all of these things, according to what the land bank says themselves. Now, the principles that they use to essentially achieve this purpose or to achieve a positive outcome for these land bank parcels is to encourage the development and reuse of vacant properties, to eliminate blight and revitalize neighborhoods, to return property to a productive tax-paying status, to sell properties at fair market value. So if we're looking at this, something that the Kansas City, Missouri Land Bank is doing, they're taking a step further than even selling properties at fair market value, but rather to increase the opportunities for achieving equity, they're selling properties at the cost of $1 to organizations who can ensure that they have the funds and the means to rehabilitate homes for the purposes of safe and habitable housing. Another principle is for open space and urban gardening. We can attest to this here at Groundwork NRG. One of our ongoing projects right now for the installation of green infrastructure is currently happening on a vacant lot for the purposes of mitigating stormwater while also beautifying a neighborhood, and that parcel is at 710 Oakland. Another principle is to convey properties at a discount. So that can be for if the proposed use will provide significant community benefits. As I said, similar to what's happening in KCMO, and there's so much potential for this exact principle to be actualized and realized, especially in Northeast Kansas City, Kansas. Their principle is to convey land through a predictable, timely, and transparent process. And these are, again, the land bank's own principles that they have set out for themselves to discourage real estate speculation and for economic development purposes. Now, when I look at this list personally, everything on this list sounds great. Everything on this list sounds like something that I'm totally attuned with, something that I absolutely support in terms of development process. But just like any other governmental body who works through elected officials who carry out these things and who uphold these things, it is our job as residents, as community members, to stay informed on what is happening with the land bank, so that we can ensure that these principles and the purpose of the land bank is being upheld to the highest degree, and that we really are seeing these transformative changes, such as revitalization of neighborhoods, the elimination of blight, open space and urban gardening, discouraging real estate speculation. To ensure that all of these things are happening, sessions like this and conversations like this need to expand beyond just this presentation, so that we can ensure that these things are truly being actualized by those who we have set out to govern us and to govern 3,500 parcels in Wyandotte County. That is a lot of land. That is a lot of homes. So if we want to ensure that all of these things are being actualized with those 3,500 properties, we have to continuously stay informed, and we have to continue to be able to advocate for the actualization of these things. So how the land bank operates for everyday people like us who might be interested in breaking off a piece of that 3,500 parcels that the land bank owns is through a qualified application process. So qualified applicants, according to the land bank, how they operate, if any one of us was to go to the land bank with an inquiry today, wanting to purchase or come under ownership of a piece of land or property, we must not own any real property that is subject to any violations of state laws, codes, or ordinances. So we have to be in good standing in that regard with the state of Kansas. We cannot own any property that is currently tax delinquent, for fear that if we already struggle to pay property taxes for one property, then the next property, it'll just be a bigger burden for us. We cannot be barred from transactions with local government entities, so we cannot have gotten into trouble in that regard in the past. We cannot have demonstrated insufficient experience or a lack of capacity to perform with the Wyandotte County Land Bank's principles. So essentially what that means is that we have to demonstrate that we have the experience, the budget, the planning expertise, what have you, to stay in accordance with what the land bank requires of us. So if I want to come under a property that is currently super close to being condemned, but I'm like, I can bring it back to life, I have to show that I have that expertise and that qualification to bring that property back to life before they will even consider me as an applicant. I cannot have failed to perform in prior transactions with the land bank. So if I took it all the way to the step of process where I was about to get a property with the land bank, and then maybe I fell through or some things fell through, I can't have failed to perform a prior transaction with the land bank. And of course, I cannot currently be banned from bidding at a tax sale. So all of these things, if you're thinking of even putting in an inquiry to the land bank because you want to extend your yard and there's a vacant property next to you, and you say, okay, I want to extend my yard out to this land. And if you want a transaction like that, if you want to purchase a piece of land because you feel like you want to build a home, you want to build something for retail use, just make sure that all of these things are what makes a qualified applicant. You cannot have A, B, C, D, or E, or F attached to your name if you would like to be considered. So now qualified offers takes it a step further. If you're a qualified applicant, you meet everything from the page before. You must also meet what is understood by the land bank as a qualified offer. So a qualified offer is an application that adequately describes the purchaser's plans for the property. So as I said, if you want to use that property because you want to extend your yard, if you want to use that property because you or your community wants to cultivate a green space there, or if you want to use that property because you want to build your dream home, you have to have a clear and concise plan for the intended use of the property that you want to come under. You have to ensure that your offer is aligned with the purpose of the Wyandotte County Land Bank so that it meets any one of those purpose statements that I shared before, whether that is for community use, whether that's for beautification, whether that's to eliminate blight, different things like that. You have to ensure that it is aligned with the purpose of the Wyandotte County Land Bank. You also have to ensure that the property that you're coming under ownership of or that you're interested in, be it land or a parcel, is consistent with the Wyandotte County Land Bank or UG plans and all city plans. So as I mentioned before, the Northeast Area Master Plan may designate that in the future, one strip of land or one block is to be used for commercial use only, or is to have the zoning change to where it is all office buildings or all restaurants or what have you. But if you drive down the street and you see an empty lot in between, all of these uses, and you say, I want to build a house there, it's not going to be possible because unfortunately building your house there in the middle of or in the middle of a commercial strip is not going to be consistent with city plans or UG plans. So it's important to not only stay aware of what's going on in the land bank, but also to be active in what's going on in the community as far as community planning goes. Be aware of any city plans that are either countywide, that are citywide, that are for a specific neighborhood, because there are neighborhood plans, neighborhood level plans that can be ratified by the UG, as well as area plans, such as the Northeast Area Master Plan. So it's always good to be aware of those things nonetheless, just to know what's happening in the community, but take it a step further. If you want to submit a qualified offer, you have to know what's going on around you. The applicant must also demonstrate financial and operational capacity to carry out the plans. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, if you are going to take on a project that is going to cost you, it's going to require you to come out of pocket $100,000, you have to have proof that in some way, shape, or form, you can carry that load of $100,000, both in the financial capacity, but also in the operation. So do you have an adequate budget and things like that? What it takes to have a qualified offer is going to be a majority of what the rest of this presentation is about. How do you get to that point where you become a qualified applicant? And how do you get to that point where, as a qualified applicant, you can provide a qualified offer that could get you a piece of land or that could get you a property that you want? So for more information about the land bank and what I've shared, these links are embedded here, and these can become public after the presentation or in the chat if you would like to take it a step further, take your knowledge a step further. So this is going to take you directly to the land bank's website. This is going to take you specifically to the policies and procedures document, where you can read everything from tip to toe what you need to know before you go to the land bank and submit an inquiry about a property or a piece of land. And this is where you go. Once you read all of this and you say, you know what, this is me, I have a plan, I'm ready, me and my community want to go after acquiring a plot of land or a house or what have you, then this is where you go here, land bank inquiry form. And it's just a brief one-page form that you give the greatest hits of what you know, what you're going to use it for, how much you expect it to cost, what parcel it is exactly. And they will get back to you if they are interested in accepting the offer that you provide. So all of this information will be available after the presentation, and you can use it to do whatever you would like. So now I'm going to go a little deeper into the meat of what this presentation is going to be about, beyond just becoming aware of the land bank and how it operates. This is really where we get into the 101 basics of what it takes for community land acquisition and development to take place. So this phrase right here, due diligence, a lot of us use that in our daily terminology. You know, I can't go to sleep tonight. I haven't done my due diligence with my homework or with my chores, or, you know, whatever it is that you feel like you have not done the full extent of the work or the full extent of your research. We use this term a lot, but in terms of the specifics of real estate, this term means something specific. So due diligence, where do we start? Why do we have to do it? And how do we get it done? So in the case of land acquisition and development, due diligence refers to an investigation into all potential risks. And if I could have highlighted this and underlined it, all potential risks, I would have done so. And I think I may in the future, because it really can seem like a can of worms whenever you're getting into wanting to buy a piece of land or wanting to buy a property. Where do you even start? What do you even have to know before you go into something that's supposed to be an investment to ensure that you're not taking on a liability? So the risks that we're talking about today, and that you will come across in any research that you do, those are going to be environmental risks. So what is in the soil beneath the house? What is in the air above the house? What is in the trees and the plants and everything surrounding the house? If there is those things, those are environmental risks. Economic risks, obviously knowing how much is this going to cost? How much am I expecting to put up front to ensure that this is even going to happen? How am I ensuring that I'm not putting money into something that's going to end up costing me more money in the long run? And legal risks, of course, these are a little bit more technical, but this can involve things like liens on houses. If you're coming into a property or you want to have a property that someone else got into legal trouble with before, how can you make yourself aware of all those things so that you're not taking that on yourself? So all of these things are associated with the potential ownership and maintenance of a piece of land or property, and they're so important to think about answering before you even consider it. So the important part, and why I've highlighted it here, is that your due diligence has to be performed before buying land. You wouldn't buy a new, I know that I personally wouldn't buy a used car if I never drove it, if I didn't read the Carfax, if I didn't speak to the owner beforehand, you know, especially considering different factors. So 100,000 miles on a car might look like a home that's been vacant for 10 years. You know, there may be some consistency there with the level of risk that I'm willing to get into. So if you wouldn't buy a car without having driven it and know everything about it first, that's the same thing with buying land. You cannot just buy a piece of land because you have no idea what's below the surface. And I mean that literally. And doing this before buying land can prevent development complications, financial loss, and overall liability for complicated issues, as I alluded to before. And to begin the due diligence process, you have to be prepared to tackle answering the following questions. And here we go. This is about to be the tip of the iceberg. Stay with me. Brace yourself, okay? You see, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can answer 5 questions. Okay, let's see. So zoning, what can be built here? There might be 10 other questions embedded in this, because once you get the answer, like I said, it might be a can of worms. Zoning, what can be built here? If I want to buy a dream home and build a dream home here, but then they tell me this can only be built for commercial, what happens after that? If I really want to fight it, and if I really don't want to think about moving, this is really my dream spot, what can you do to have the zoning change to your desires? Land use, what can the development be used for? If I say I'm building a house, but then I want to run a tattoo shop out of my house, or a hair salon, or a barbershop out of my house, is that possible? Can the development be used for that? Can it be used for 2 purposes, for a retail purpose and a home purpose? Topography, do I have a lot that is flat, sloped, or too steep? And how is that going to affect my building process or my financial process? Utilities, does the site have adequate access to utilities? So if I want to build a house that's way off in the cut, and I've always dreamed of having a farm by myself and never having to see people again, that's all fine and great, but am I going to have adequate electricity? Am I going to have adequate access to plumbing lines and things like that? So that is also very important to understand. Easements, are there extra setback requirements due to a buried or overhead utility lines? Are there old access paths that go through the property that I would have to account for, and many more questions. So I really wanted to hit hard on so many questions. If you see this link in the title of this article down here, this person is suggesting 120 land due diligence items you should perform before buying. So that's at least, according to this person, and obviously this is going to change if you go into this website. There's going to be specific things that are not going to impact Kansas residents for any reason, that different states may have different things. But I would say, say 20 of those, best case scenario, 20 of these questions down here don't have to be answered by us because of the specific type of property we want, the specific state that we live in or something. You want to expect to have to answer at least 100 land due diligence items that you should know the answer to, you should have the specs for before buying a piece of land. So you see this lady over here, she's crying. That's me inside when I think about how hard and how daunting this task can seem. You're saying I have to do my own due diligence? Can't I just hire somebody to answer all these questions for me and do all of this research for me and, just make my life easier? I know that I'm not a millionaire. I'm not rich by any means. I would love, if I wanted to build my dream home, I would love to just hire one person who could sit behind a computer all day and sit on the phone or sit behind an email all day and answer all of these questions for me. But the reality is that most of us, we're coming from humble beginnings and we want to break off a little piece of that American dream for ourselves, be it, owning a home, owning a piece of land, expanding the land that we have. But we don't have to do it completely on our own. If we are coming from those humble beginnings, there are people, a few people that we can enlist to help answer some of these questions. So as you see on this, the Board of Public Utilities, BPU, those questions before that I was asking about utilities and the due diligence items that you have to know. Am I going to have adequate access to utilities if I want this piece of land or home? BPU can help you figure that out. The Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, as well as KDHE, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, can help you answer some of those site questions of if you're getting into some cobwebs or if you're getting into the weeds of a site that was used before as a oil refinery. Not that that's super common, but you don't want to be buying up a piece of land and expecting that you're going to grow this beautiful garden and these beautiful tulips and sunflowers, and then you realize that they're all consumed with lead or they're all consumed with other harmful contaminants that are in the soil. Nobody wants that. You don't want that. I don't want that for you. I don't want you to grow a beautiful vegetable garden and then something you're eating is contaminated with things. Unified Government of Wyandotte County and Kansas City, Kansas, as well as Public Works. They can help you to answer a lot of the different questions about, especially legal questions and things like that. Just knowing what's the history of this property or the piece of land, as well as many commercial options for site assessment, remediation, and more. So for those of us who have a pretty penny to spend to try and maybe hire somebody to help you answer these questions, or at least consolidate all the information that you need to know to help you get a better understanding, there are many commercial options for assessments, remediations, and all of these things. So with that, I'm going to put you in the hands of a super professional, Seth Metling, who can give you more information about these site assessments, why they are so incredibly important, and how you can access the best inroads to coming under land ownership in Kansas. So with that, I'll go to the next slide, and Seth, you're on.
Hi, everybody. I really like what Monica said, that on the previous slide, there are a bunch of organizations that may be able to help you, and to get in contact with them to see what they can help with when you're looking at redeveloping a site. I work for Kansas Department of Health and Environment, the Brownfields program, and the term brownfields it's not obvious. Greenfields, we all know what greenfields are. They're just really nice, pristine fields that everybody wants. Well, brownfields are those underdeveloped, underutilized properties where the redevelopment or the reuse of these may be complicated by the presence of hazardous substances, pollutants, or contaminants, or it could be that they have there's a possible presence that these hazardous substances, pollutants, and contaminants may exist on the property. So there's a big question mark on these properties, and what we do with the Brownfields program is to look at the property, do an environmental assessment, and take that stigma that may be on the property and why it hasn't been developed, and we try to remove that stigma so that the properties is able to be put back into reuse. So the way we do this is we perform environmental site assessments. We call these phase ones. These environmental site assessments, they look into the past uses of the property. There are different components that are involved, and it's a pretty extensive report. But basically what these phase one environmental assessments do is they look at past uses to determine the likelihood that contamination exists on the property based on possible chemicals that were used, or, let's say a vacant property, a vacant land bank property, we don't have permits that the building, the house, the structure was removed. And so it may have been demoed into the foundation. So there may be asbestos that we're concerned about. So we just don't know, based on commercial or residential purposes, what may be on the property. And it could have been had multiple different commercial businesses on the property that we want to look into. The reason why we perform environmental site assessments is basically you're doing your due diligence, and the intent is to provide liability protection for you prior to purchase. So really hammering that home. Monica said that earlier. We want to do the due diligence for liability protection prior to purchase. If we do it after purchase, there's no guarantee that you will have liability protections. And what the liability protections are from, if we did the site assessment prior to purchase, we know that you did not own the property at the time, and you did not have operations on the property that utilize certain chemicals or hazardous material. So we know that you are set aside or apart from past uses of the property. And that's what we want to look at. So we have a snapshot of the property's past uses, and we can say that you were not the property owner at the time, and therefore you are not liable for contamination if it exists. Also, if contamination is found to exist after the site assessment takes place, then we know that cleanup or anything that may result, you are not going to be held financially responsible for. The good news about all of this is KDHE provides 100% free phase one and phase two environmental site assessments, free of charge. You just have to have eligible property and be an eligible applicant. And we'll go through those in a second. So, you might ask, what is a phase two? Phase one just gives us a baseline. In the event that a phase one is determined that the contamination exists or it has the potential to exist on the property, we recommend a phase two. Again, this can be done either prior to purchase or even post-purchase if you want to take that, the ownership of that property. And what the phase two involves is soil or groundwater sampling to determine specifically if it is in the groundwater, if it is in the soil, and where. Also, if it exists, at what level. So we can look at the property, and based on your intended reuse, if it's for commercial or residential, we can determine if contamination exists, yes, but it does not meet a threshold where it is harmful to health, the health or environment, human health or environment. So, we have different levels that we can look at. Residential is the lowest level. So You can only have low level contamination on the property potentially to redevelop. For commercial, you can have a little bit higher levels, and that's all based on whether or not people are going to be on the property and for how long. So in the event that contamination is found, I won't get into all the programs that we have, but we can also link you with a program within our bureau to help address any contamination that's there. I will say that after the phase one, you can walk away. You don't have to buy a property if there is a potential presence of contamination or hazardous material. That's why we do it before. If you do the environmental assessment and you say, you know what, I'm not this risk level, it's not really for me right now, you can always go to a different property and look to redevelop it. So.
And I would add to that, just to make it clear that that's not considered failing either.
No.
Yeah. So the land bank won't hold that against you.
Yeah, you're looking at the right property for your investment purpose. And if we find contamination might exist on the property or does exist, then that may be more to take on than you're willing to at that point. So you may look at a different property, maybe just down the street or in another neighborhood. Eligibility for the program, you need to be a community or nonprofit. A private party can also be eligible, but you need to have a letter of support from either a community or a nonprofit in that community. Sites that are eligible are typically commercial or industrial, or have a past history of commercial and industrial. Residential properties can also be eligible if you're going to be making those into a park or green space. And we worked with Groundwork NRG on 710 Oakland on doing the environmental site assessment for that property. Residential is a little more tricky. Residential properties can be eligible if there's a developer who's looking at acquiring and redeveloping the plot, but it would need to be multiple parcels. Residential properties can also, or I guess I said that, residential properties can be eligible for park or green space. Land-based properties are also eligible for assessment. And that's for commercial, green space, mixed use, commercial industrial, commercial industrial or commercial residential. Yeah, again, what sites might be eligible: land bank properties, historic commercial areas, properties where existing structure has been removed or used as infill, former filling stations, auto repair facilities, dry cleaners, row buildings, vacant commercial properties, and then vacant residential lots with the intention to expand commercial or multi-residential operations. And this is my contact information. If you have any questions, I will be around for the question and answer. You are more than welcome to call me anytime or shoot me an email with a list of questions. I'm usually fairly responsive, and I'm more than welcome anybody contacting me.
Whoops, sorry. Okay. 1 second. I tried to go back and it went forward, but I wanted to just take this time to now introduce Megan Painter, again from Community Housing of Wyandotte County, who will be just going a little deeper dive into all things development, planning for development, planning to come under ownership of property or land. And with that, Megan, I will allow you to take it away. I'm going to share my screen again.
So what I'm going to be talking about today are the basic things that you need to have in order to both get actual land out of the land bank and to be considered qualified. If you're using a bank or even an investor, these are things that they're going to want to see, and you need it for yourself, basically, if you're going to be building a home. So first of all, the maybe most obvious thing that you're going to need are floor plans and plot plans. And I have some images to show you here next. With residential uses, you actually do not need an architect for that, but you do need an engineer. And when it comes to who you hire to do these things, as it says here, there are very expensive ways to do it. And then there are some other people, especially that we've been working with for a really long time, that are far less expensive. So it's easy to say, hey, I need a survey, I'll hire a civil engineer, and then all of a sudden they want to charge you $3,000, whereas we've got someone who we call him up and he charges us $400. So, you know, very different ways of doing things. We have floor plans that we use all the time and that we've developed. But if we went to an architect, sorry, that's my doorbell. If we went to an architect every single time, that would be $8,000 per house. So very expensive ways and less expensive ways to kind of still do things responsibly, but cut the corner of a lot of expensive consultants. The biggest thing that I do whenever I'm even looking at a land bank application, sometimes I get the packet, is I look at, has this individual considered the topography of the site? I see so many people, their site looks like this and their house looks like this, and there's nothing to make up the in-between there. And that's kind of how I judge people to see, do you really know what you're doing? If your house is, you know, is built on slab, but you're trying to build on a very sloped lot, I know you've got a lot of work to do. You know, the topography can change which house you decide to build on that lot. And that's almost exclusively how we decide what houses are going to be built, other than setback requirements. So can we go to the next slide? So here's an example of one of the house plans that we've developed. You can see it shows structural notes on it. It has the windows, it has you know, the beams that are going to need to be there, and the general layout. It's pretty simple in terms of the architectural world. There's not, except in the engineering's notes, there's not wall sections or interior elevations. This is like one of the most condensed and simplistic things that the county will accept for having house plans. Go on to the next one. And this also protects you as a homeowner from knowing what you're actually getting. And if you call out, you know, I want this size of window, but your general contractor shorts you and you get this size of window, you'd be like, that's not the plan, man. Do it according to the drawings. So it's also a protection, and so everyone knows what you're building. The other thing that you're going to need is your plot plan to submit to the city. So that's going to show here, well, I've got it listed, the legal description here. And a lot of times people have said, hey, I can't understand that, write a new legal description for me so that I can understand it. We can't do that. This is a very specific way of describing land that only a few people really understand. But this is what shows up on your deed and your title, and you want to make sure everything lines up there. And then how you can actually verify what you're purchasing. You can get one of these site plans and you can ask them to mark the property lines for you in person. So you can see the property lines, you can see, I don't know if the setbacks are on here or not, a little bit, but there are setback implications to various types of zoning that you'll need to do. If you're on a corner lot, it's a bigger side setback than on non-corner lots. You're going to see the outline of the house. You're going to see the topography, which are these dashed lines here, and you can see like 881, 882, 883. So these are 1 foot increments. If you go online, those are usually 2 foot increments, but it gives you an idea of which way the land is sloping and what's going on there. Easements. So there are no easements shown on this particular plot plan, but there are some lots that we looked at that there's this line that kind of goes diagonally through it, and we can't build on anything east of that diagonal line because that is a buried utility line. Or that's a place where the Public Works has decided sometime in the future we're going to need to put something there. So that's something that you really can't get around. I have worked with a guy that had a huge easement going through the land bank property that he was looking at. And he was amazed about how much he could not build on, but there was nothing to do about it, just because that needed to be there because there was a buried stream bed, for example. We talked about utility lines, so you can see on my plot plan, SS, sanitary sewers in the back alley, and then the water lines. I don't know where the water lines here. Sanitaries here. Well, we didn't have the water lines marked here, but it will show you water lines too and where those are located, and maybe gas lines as well. And then you can also see there are some points listed describing the foundation and the footing and the basement and the garage. Your surveyor is going to mark kind of where the house sits on the land, because you don't want the house sticking up too far, and then you definitely don't want it too low because then you're going to have major water issues. So there's a little bit of engineering that goes into that as well. All right. So the biggest question normally is, how are you going to pay for this thing? And how much is it going to cost? So we have found in the past that we can do all the estimating we want, but really the most solid way to find out how much this house is going to cost is to go to whoever's going to be building the house. We hire general contractors, or we are a general contractor, and we collect bids from all of the subcontractors that we're going to need. So the foundation guy, the guy who's moving the dirt, the guys who are removing the trees that are in the way, the framers, the lumber company, hardware companies. We go to every single one and we say, here's our plan. How much is it going to cost for you to provide the materials, or for you to build the thing, or to do the plumbing here? We found that that is absolutely, the most reliable way to know what you're getting into. And then we put a big cushion on there too, because we don't know, for example, even if you get a site, an environmental, we don't know that this soil is pretty crappy and the house is going to sink unless we spend way more money on the foundation. So we always put a cushion in there too, just for all the unforeseen things that are going to happen when you actually start digging a hole. So I'm just making sure I covered all of that. Sometimes you do talk to general contractors, just like, hey, with a decent house, what is your general cost per square foot? That can give you a nice round idea. Like, for example, we're running at $120 a square foot. That was before the pandemic and all of these lumber shortages. We're probably running at $128, $130 now. So it gives you a general idea of how much a house is going to cost, but it's not the safest way to really know what you're getting into, because there might be something with your site that makes it more too, that, and foundation costs can go up quickly. Next slide. So there are other options with prefabricated homes that we've looked into. I have not had too much luck with those at all. First of all, some of our neighborhood leaders don't like how they look. And most of these prefabricated homes are also designed for super wide lots, and we have thin lots in the city. So there's not a ton of options out there that are readily available to us. And on top of that, you still have all the costs for the foundation. You have to find someone who actually knows how to deliver a house on that foundation. You've got utility lines still, so there are still a lot of costs. And every time I've done the exercise, it's ended up being a little more expensive or just the same amount as doing a full-blown house on the site. let me see. Yeah, and then the final note there too is, you know, prefabricated homes are basically designed to go on slab foundations, and good luck finding there are not very many sloped lots in Kansas City, Kansas, or flat lots in Kansas City, Kansas. We've got a few, and they're hard to find though. So with how CHWC finances a lot of our houses, you know, we're not building anything, you know, there are a lot of soft costs built on top of things other than your hard construction costs, like how much is it going to cost to get the loan? What is the realtor going to charge you for selling this thing? So there are additional costs even above the construction costs that we're looking at. So, you know, it's best just to have $200,000, and until lumber prices come down like 210, 215. That's how much you're going to need to be able to collect in order to build the thing. And most people, like, we work with banks all the time, but banks only work with contractors they have worked with several times, basically. If you're an individual, you're not really going to have luck with a bank, unfortunately. And when you go to a bank, they're going to want to see the house plans, the plot plans, the budget, the specs for building. The specifications for building are basically saying, hey, here are the products that we're going to use, and here's the quality standards that we're going to apply to this house, so that you know we're not building a piece of crap that is not going to appraise and that's going to fall apart, and then it's going to be on us and on you whenever this house can't sell because of how crappy it is. Let me see. When you usually go to a bank, if you are lucky enough to find an institution that will help you, you need to have 20% down. So $40,000 right there, if you're going for a $200,000 house. And that's hard, and none of us really have that. So it is really hard to work with financial institutions. The one way around it, and maybe this is my next slide, that we found that's most accessible is, we did this with a couple who was trying to build a house in Rosedale. We were able to find them a general contractor who could finance their build. So not a lot of general contractors are super savvy with banking, but some are. And those are the guys that can get the construction loan for you, and you just have to prove to them that you can get the mortgage to pay for that house once they're done with it. So really, I think that's the way that opens most doors for people. Whenever we're building houses too, there's a very big problem in Kansas City, Kansas, and it's getting better with the real estate market. But then we've got material costs being thrown at us too. There is a difference in cost between how much it costs to build the house and how much you can sell it for. And this is a little bit different if you are, you know, building for yourself, but you're still probably going to get a mortgage, and the bank has to agree that the price, how much money you put in to build the thing, is equal to how much money they're going to loan you. And a lot of times that doesn't line up. So either you need to have the cash to make up for that, or this is mainly available to nonprofits in our area. There are subsidies that we can go after that will fill that gap, that will allow the $15,000 that, you know, the house wasn't worth in order to construct, to fill that so that the house can be sold at the price that's both affordable to the person, and that, you know, we can make the money work, basically. I'm going to leave the discussion about investors to Carlonda, though. And I'll be done.
Okay, thank you, Megan. I'll go ahead and leave this slide up until Carlonda tells me to change it, but I would like to introduce now everybody to Carlonda McKinney. She introduced herself earlier in the presentation, and now she will be giving you some firsthand pro tips on how to even begin to think about beginning to go on this process yourself. So Carlonda, take it away.
Sure. We can go to the next slide.
Okay.
So a few things to keep in mind when you start down this path, this developer path, are begin with the end in mind, right? So first you need to ask yourself, what is it that you're wanting to build? Because that will lend to literally everything else. Are you wanting to build for yourself? Are you wanting to build things and sell them to other people? Are you wanting to build something commercial? That influences who you need to talk to, how much money you're gonna need to raise, all of the above. Where is it best suited? So once you decide, when I decided what we wanted to build single family homes. So I literally just drove around Kansas City until I found a place that I thought would be good. And this started off as an endeavor to build my own house. Some of you may or may not know this. This started off as an endeavor to build my own home, and then quickly grew into me building houses for other people that I knew that were interested in. Go.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, I have a 9-year-old roommate. Okay, so anyway, apologies. This started off as me wanting to build my own home, and then as conversations occurred, other people asked me to do the same for them. Since I'm kind of an entrepreneur at heart, I figured that, sure, I can do that. If I knew then what I know now, I'm not sure I would have made the leap, but here we are. So what is your goal when you're building? Are you trying to make a profit, or are you trying to provide super affordable housing? Are you trying to, you know, maybe partner with community organizations and provide housing for, you know, homeless people? What is it that you're trying to do? Because that's also going to influence how you, structure your funding, right? And we'll get into a little bit of the funding options later. I know Megan mentioned that I can talk to you a bit about investors, which I can, because that's actually how we're funding our builds, are with investment dollars. We didn't go to a bank, although we could have, but an investor made. Go to the next slide. Oh, here we go. And how much of your personal resources can you commit? This is going to be expensive. This is going to cost you some money. I know a lot of us probably see the Facebook memes or the social media memes that are like, oh, get you $1,000 and buy money from the land bank and build you a mansion, stop running money, blah, blah, blah. It's a lie. That's not how it works. You are not, you can buy houses for $1 in Missouri, but the amount of money that you have to put into that is why they're selling them for $1, because the city doesn't want to do it. The city can't afford to do it. So they want you to do it, much like with land bank lots. So let's say you can get a pretty nice size plot for a few $100s. Sure, that sounds great, but then you think about, you have to now figure out what to do with that lot and how to pay for it. And even though we do have an investor, we've put in a lot of personal resources into this. Time, not just finances, but time. It takes a lot of time. I've been doing this for about 1.5 years, right? So things to know as you're moving down the path. You need to have a plan. So, and when I say a plan, I mean, if you're wanting to do more than just build a house for yourself, you can't come in guns blazing and say, I'm going to build 10 houses right now all at once, unless you have all the money just sitting around waiting for you. You have to kind of plan it out. And one good tactic to kind of use to plan is, you know, have your pulse on the market demand. So right now we're in a really booming housing market. It's not going to be that way forever. So, you know, I wouldn't recommend building 10 houses in a recession. That might be the best idea. Right now, it could work. Be aware of the happenings in your community. So one of the reasons that I picked Turtle Hill to build on, not just because I really like the area, my parents and I used to go to church up the street from there on 8th and Walker and Bethel and went to Sumner, all that. But that piece of land is within walking distance of so much stuff that's about to be built in Wyandotte County. And these are things that can help you sell whatever it is you're building. So whether it's office space, whether it's homes, whether it's a coffee shop, whatever it is that you want to build is going to be very useful for you to know what else is happening in that area. One, so that you can build a business case so that you can raise funds. So if you're going to, and let me back up. One of the ways that we got an investor to give us money is because I took everything I know about what's happening in Turtle Hill and I pre-sold that to people that I know want to kind of be in and around cool stuff, walkable amenities, blah, blah, blah. And I got 7 letters of interest from people who want to buy houses that I haven't even built yet. I took those letters of interest to investors and say, I already have them sold. You just need to help me build them. And that's what happened. So if you know there's going to be a lot of cool things going up somewhere, you can use that to your advantage. You can really leverage that. Even if you're, like I said, anything you're wanting to build, you can leverage what's going to be happening in the area to get money to help you build it. It won't be free money, it will be expensive money, which is another point I want to make. This is a heavy lift. And however you fund it, if it's not a gift, if there's any kind of interest or fees attached, do not close on your loan until you are ready to go vertical, because you're going to have to start paying on that money and it's going to cost you. The longer you have that out, the larger the amount is that you have out. So let's say I had closed on a loan 5 months ago. We haven't gone vertical yet. And once you go vertical, that's still another 7 months before you can actually close on that home to a buyer. So that's over a year of interest and fees that I wouldn't have had to pay if I had just waited until we actually have broken ground and got past all the other due diligence stuff that that's been talked about earlier in the presentation. Also want to make sure that this isn't going, make sure you know that this isn't going to be easy. And not only do you need to be aware of community happenings, you need to know who your stakeholders are. I think I talk about this a little bit on the next slide, which we can go to. Yes, get familiar with your stakeholders. I made a point very early on to meet the people who have a vested interest in the area that I'm wanting to build in. Not just for like shaking hands and kissing babies purposes, but to really find out what they wanted to happen. Because what you don't want to happen is to, for lack of a better term, to do what the developers of Beacon Hill did in Missouri, anywhere in KCK, which is they kind of bulldozed their way in, built these $1 million homes, outpriced everyone else. And it was a thing, right? You don't want to do that. That's not a conscionable way to proceed if you're a developer. So get familiar with the stakeholders, get familiar with the local CDCs, the neighborhood associations, people who want to see good things happen in our communities, and they will root for you if you include them. There's really no other simple way to say that. Know the process. So a missed deadline can really set you back. With the land bank, there are particular dates, and I think they're quarterly, that they present all land bank requests to the committee. If you miss that deadline, you don't get presented until the next time around. So if you're on like a tight timeline, you need to know what's happening and when it's happening within the government. There is a right way and a wrong way to get a loan. So if you get a loan before you have permits, it's going to cost you a whole lot more because that's a lot riskier for the lender. I kind of mentioned before that you don't want to close on a loan until you're ready to go vertical. And if you get an investor amount, it's not technically a loan. So banks and investors, they look at things a little bit differently. Banks are they're kind of like the UPS where investors are like a FedEx. if that analogy makes sense. Yes, they move slow and there's a lot of bureaucracy, but they get it done. FedEx is like, absolutely has to be there tomorrow. Investors can write you checks pretty quickly. Investors also are probably not going to need to see as much of a track record as a bank will need to see, but an investor is probably going to take more of your money on the back end. That's just the nature of investing. There are different ways that you can structure an investment though. There are different ways you can structure a loan, a development loan. Our investment deal is structured as we pay back on closing of each house. So we pay the loan back in tranches, which helps us because we don't have to start paying while we're building. Just as we close, we take the mortgage and we pay a chunk of the investment back. There is another deal that we were looking at where it's more of a traditional, just a fee simple kind of investment, but it's a fee simple loan from an investor. So they give you $100,000, you make the case to give them back $100,000 plus 10%. And that works for more like individual angel type investors, not so much institutional or investment funds. And here's why. This is the pitch that we made. A 10% return is higher than what you're going to get on a CD, and it's more stable than what you'll get in the stock market, and we'll get it back to you quicker. So there's a lot of ways you can frame what you're wanting, you know, what you're needing to make it make sense for someone to write you a check. No one exists on an island. So this has also been kind of covered a little bit. You are going to need to lean on someone. You can't do it all yourself. If you're doing more than just building your own personal home, and even building your own personal home is a heavy lift. But if you're doing anything beyond that, you're going to need to find your tribe. You're going to need to find people who have done it or are also doing it, where you can ask them questions, where you can figure out things like, hey, if you don't have a basement, you need to reinforce one of your bathrooms because we're in a tornado zone, right? And it costs just as much to do that as it does to dig a basement, and basements give you more value on your house. So why don't you just build a house with a basement, right? Maybe not something you would know, but if you're talking to someone who has done this before, that's something that they can tell you. And you can also bounce different ideas and share resources and maybe learn some things that you wouldn't have known otherwise. So for example, one of the lots we're building on are next to some lots owned by another entity. And they said, oh, there might have been something here before. There might have, I think there used to be like a gas station or something over there. You might want to look into that. I didn't know that, you know, but because I'm talking to people and getting to know the other people in the industry and other people in the neighborhood, that's stuff that had I heard that like after I had already tried to start building a house there, it might have been an issue, would have been an issue, right? So just things like that to keep in mind. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, when you are dealing with, I would say this is off the record, but we're being recorded, so it's not so much off the record. When you're dealing with any governmental entity, be prepared to wait, but also know who's who. So when I say that, without saying names, if you're not getting a response from someone within a governmental agency, maybe a good way to get a response is to find out who they report up to and start adding that person to your emails to someone. Then you'll get a quicker response. Or, you know, figuring out who's the gatekeeper and who's the decision maker, because those aren't always the same person. And you need both of those people on your side, right? So that's really important, something that people probably wouldn't tell you. I will say it took me months to figure out who I actually needed to talk to. At the very beginning of this, I talked to the wrong people for like a long time until I figured out that that's not actually who I need to be asking questions to. And it could have saved me like 3 months, right? So things to look at on the front end. So I think that is it. I know there's probably a ton more that's in my brain, so if you have questions, you might like shake it free, I can tell you. But my last thought is, if you decide to go down this crazy path, there's lots of people who will help you. You know, Kansas City is such an awesome city, and we have a resource, which is land, and it's not, hasn't historically been properly cared for. And if there are people who are willing to make the investment, the monetary, the sweat equity investment into, you know, shining it, polishing it off, and making it shiny new, then that's awesome. And particularly when it's people from the community, because I think our motivations are different. So that's that. I'll stop rambling now.
Well, thank you so much, Carlonda, for sharing that. Hopefully many people can definitely learn from the experience that you've had and the expertise that you shared from your personal experience. That brings us to the end of our presentation today.